Algebra Chapter 1, Lesson 2, and in this video we're going to look at what we call identity properties. Now, identity, that word is used multiple times in mathematics and can mean different things depending upon the context of what you're talking about. We're going to look at the identity properties, and there's one for addition and there's one for multiplication. And so we're going to look at the addition property, or the addition identity, first. Now, the additive identity, what we call the additive identity, is a number. It's some number that when you add this number to any expression, whether you're adding it to another number, or whether you're adding it to a variable, or even if you're adding it to an entire expression, adding this particular number to any of those doesn't change any of those numbers, variables, or expressions. So in other words, the additive identity, it's a number, and it's a number that when you add it to any of these expressions doesn't change any of those expressions. So what do you think that number is? I think if you thought about this a little bit, you could come up with that pretty easy. The additive identity is 0. Okay, so 0 is the additive identity. Now, why is 0 the additive identity? Well, 0 is the additive identity because when we add 0 to any number, it doesn't change the number. As down here, 6 plus 0 is still 6. If we add 0 to a variable, it doesn't change the variable. X plus 0 is still x. If you add 0 to an entire expression, 3 plus x, if you treat that as one expression and add 0 to it, it's still 3 plus x. So 0 is the additive identity because when we add 0 to any expression, it doesn't change the expression. So that's what makes it identity. And I guess, I haven't really looked this up, but I would guess that the reason it's called the identity is because adding 0 to any of these expressions doesn't change the identity of those expressions. Okay, so maybe someone would like to look that up and see if that's why they call it the identity. That's what I've always thought, and it kind of helps me remember. Adding this number to the number 6 doesn't change the identity of 6. It's still 6, or any other expression. Okay? Now, we also have a multiplication identity, okay, or a multiplicative identity. And the multiplicative identity, again, it's a number, and it's a number that when you multiply this number by any other number, by any other variable, or by any other expression, it doesn't change the identity of that expression. So what number do you think that is? What number can we multiply by anything else, and we end up with that same thing? It doesn't really change anything. And I think, again, if you thought about this, you'd come up with the number 1. And why is 1 the multiplicative identity? Because if we multiply 1 times a number, it doesn't change the number. If we multiply 1 times a variable, it doesn't change the variable. If we multiply 1 by the expression, it doesn't change the expression. Now again, both of these seem a little bit like, duh, what's the big deal? And it is kind of a simple property, but they are very valuable when it comes to solving equations or removing parentheses in an expression. If we're trying to simplify it, how do we remove those parentheses? And so while these properties or identities may seem kind of self-evident, and they're really kind of simplistic, and they really, how do we need this in more complicated math? They really do help us solve equations, and without them, we wouldn't be able to solve equations and do some of the things that we do later. Okay, so those are the identity properties for mathematics. One for addition, the additive identity is 0, and one for multiplication, the multiplicative identity is 1.